Every year, acts of violence happen over and over again in the United States. And every single time, the blame is put on video games and how that they are causing violence in kids and adults around the country. And today, we're going to look at the arguments that they have that violence is being caused by video games, the connection between the amount of video games sold and what the crime statistics actually say, and also how the United States' statistics compares to places around the world. So now, the first thing that they bring up when talking about violence in video games is that a majority of kids who cause these violent acts also play violent video games. But statistically, this doesn't make much sense. Claiming that out of 60% of people that would cause these violent acts also play video games. And this was done under a study by Craig A., who is the head of the Department of Psychology at Iowa State. But really, these statistics don't really mean anything. And in this, just because they're correlated doesn't mean that like the video games cause the violence. And in the same way, it could be said that like eating a certain type of food causes violence in the same way. So now we're going to look at the how the crime rate has actually gone down while the sale of video games has increased dramatically from around the 1990s when the violence in video games debate first came up. And looking at this, we can see that the sale of video games has actually increased by over like 300%, reaching up to $43 billion in 2018. But the crime rate of violent crimes has actually gone down over time, leading to show that violence in video games doesn't really cause these crimes in any way. And now, lastly, I'd like to look at how the sale of video games in other countries around the world does not compare to the violent crime rates in other countries in any way close to the way that it seems to do in the U.S. And here we can see that the United States is only the third highest country to buy video games per person, while we have over more than double all of the other countries combined for our homicides per 100,000 people per year, leading us to see that if this would be a problem, it wouldn't just be in the United States, which means that it has to be caused by some other reason, such as like access to guns, or a lack of like resources to care for like mental health. And now that I have talked to you today about how the other side views this topic and sees the connection between violence in video games and violent crime throughout the country, and how the violence and like the sale of video games and violence is actually connected, and how it's actually going down, and how this compares internationally to other countries around the world. And that's all I have.